back, ladies and gentlemen, to the She Knows Pro Football podcast. Once again, I'm Alice, aka the NFL Girl. And once again, I got my good friend Dominick here from Fantasy Hot Read. Dominick, how you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. It's a little rainy here today. We're having some thunderstorms, but all in all, it's not too bad. Always glad to be back with you. I missed podcasting with you, and hopefully we can do another one again, soon after the draft.
We could definitely go over and break down some of the picks we expect to happen and what surprises that may have popped up during the draft, because there's always at least one. And I expect that to happen again next week. Well, you guys, we've been away. Super Bowl passed. It's been a little quiet. There wasn't any off-season OTA so far. There wasn't a combine, so it hasn't been a whole lot for us to cover. But you guys, it was some amazing moves in free agency. It was some amazing retirements that we expected to happen that did. And most of all, we got draft coming up next week. So we got a lot to cover, you guys. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And off the break, of course, we got to catch up on our retirements. Now, previously, we had talked about Philip Rivers retiring, and that Philip Rivers could be a first ballot Hall of Famer if and only if Drew Brees did not retire. Guess what, you guys? Drew Brees retired. So my question is a very simple one for you, Dominick. One, is Drew Brees a first ballot Hall of Famer? And how does this affect Philip Rivers' chance of also being a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Well, I think it's pretty simple to me. We talked about it off air, and obviously there's been a big Twitter debate this week about who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame and who doesn't. Drew Brees is one of those players that there is no ifs, ands, or buts or debates. He's up there with Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, Joe Montana. These guys are Hall of Famers. There's no questions at all. Philip Rivers is more borderline, which means that Drew Brees is going to be the one that gets in the Hall of Fame. He's absolutely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he's not, there's something completely wrong. This is going to push Philip Rivers down to his probably second year on the ballot if he's able to get in. And even if that happens, it's going to be tough because we don't know if Tom Brady's going to retire after this year, which he probably won't, or if, Ben Roethlisberger retires after this year, which is more likely. If he does, then he's probably going to get in, and that's going to knock down Rivers another year, and then Brady may retire after next year, so it'll be another year. So this really doesn't look good for Rivers getting in the next probably, 3 or 4 in his first 2 or 3 draft classes or eligibility years. But other than that, I think if nobody retires like that next year, like if Big Ben decides to play another year or Tom Brady plays another year, then I certainly think Philip Rivers should be in on his second attempt. But if one of them does retire, then he's not even going to get in on as a second attempt, which is bad for him because I do think he should be a Hall of Famer, as much as a lot of people, especially, Broncos fans and some fans of teams in the AFC West don't really like him because he was very showy and very rah-rah, but he's one of the best players, of this generation. I'm not going to say he's a top 10 quarterback all time, but he's certainly a top 10 quarterback of the last, 20 years.
Listen, it is no question whatsoever that Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He had a hell of a career. Let's say right now, at the time of his retirement, he was all-time passer. Now, of course, Brady is going to pass that as soon as within the first few weeks of the season starting. That's not the point. At the time that he retired, he was leading that. He's going to go down as one of the greatest QBs of all time, had a hell of a career. He even revamped the city of New Orleans by winning the Super Bowl after Hurricane Katrina. So he will go down as a legacy, not just for the sport of football, but also for what he did for the city of New Orleans and how he really brought a new audience to that team. So absolutely first ballot Hall of Fame. As far as how that affects Philip Rivers, just like you said, Dominick, it definitely affects his stock. I do not think he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer anymore. I was on the fence with him to begin with being a first ballot. It's not a question whether or not he will go in. He absolutely will go in. He had a stellar career. In particular, considering some of those teams that he played on over the years, he had a phenomenal career. He just never won the big one. Does that affect him ultimately and his ability to get into the Hall? Not at all, but it does affect the fact that he won't be a first ballot. I know that shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. It really is a thing. He will get in, but again, Dominic is saying, this depends on whether Big Ben retires or if in 2 years Tom Brady retires. If none of those situations happen, he will go in at least at second ballot. I think if not second, maybe third at the most, but he won't get beyond that, I feel. He is going in. It's just he no longer is a first ballot consideration at all, just simply because of the fact that Drew Brees is absolutely a Hall of Famer and his career is far superior to anything that Phillip Rivers did in all the years that he played.
Now, here's a kind of a joking question for you, but also kind of an honest question. Phillip Rivers, obviously he was drafted in 2004. He went number 4 and then got traded to San Diego at the time because Eli didn't want to go there, refused to play there. He's played with some great teams that went 14-2, with LT and, even with Keenan Allen and Antonio Gates, and had all these great teams, but he also had terrible lines and got beat up all the time. But with all those great teams and with all those bad lines, which to you is more impressive, the fact that he never won the big one or that he never missed a game?
It's definitely that he never missed a game. This is a man that played in the playoffs on a torn ACL. He had an incredible career. He had an amazing ability to make himself go despite back injuries, knee injuries, elbow injuries. He forced himself to play over and over and over again in behind some of the most horrific lines I've ever seen, risking, life and limb to continue to keep playing. It's definitely that as a factor. I do not think it should be held against him that he was not able to win the big one, because that doesn't all fall on him. He had played with some terrible defenses. He had a horrendous offensive line in more than one season. So I'm more impressed at the fact that he played so consistently for so many years. That impresses me way more than the fact that he never was able to, win the big one.
Yeah, and for all of you Rivers haters who say that he never showed up in the postseason, don't forget the last game of his career. He had over 330 yards passing and 3 passing touchdowns against Buffalo, even though they lost.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. His career is stunning. It's just he didn't win the big one. And he's not the only one that is in the Hall or got into the Hall and who never won the big one. I recall Terrell Owens is in, and I understand that's a different position. But the whole point is, if we're going to compare people that didn't get to the big, didn't win the big one, you can't hold that against them, period.
Dan Marino.
There you go. Exactly. Next, you guys, we got to talk about the fact that comeback player of the year for 2020, Alex Smith, retired. Dominic, what will Alex Smith's legacy be for the game of football?
Yeah, now he's the real competition for Drew Brees to be in the first ballot Hall of Fame discussion. Now he's definitely not a Hall of Famer, but I will say if there was an all tough team, he could certainly be a first or second team, even with Phillip Rivers for one of the toughest players of all time. He wasn't a high recruit. He went to Utah. He was a 3-star recruit. He built himself up there. Still has a lot of the records at Utah. Was the number 1 overall draft pick the year they didn't know whether it was going to be him or Aaron Rodgers. It's kind of a tale of 3 portions of his career as well. He had a kind of faltered the first 2 or 3 years of his career, looked like he was going to be a bust. Then he finally broke out in San Francisco before he got sat down after a concussion for Colin Kaepernick, because at the time Kaepernick was a better quarterback, they felt. He moved on to Kansas City, where all good things can happen under Andy Reid as a quarterback, and he was extremely solid there for another 5 years before he had another bad thing happen to him when Patrick Mahomes got drafted. And you're not going to beat out you're not going to beat out Patrick Mahomes. So with that said, he moved on to Washington. Obviously, that was the most devastating part of his career. He had the leg injury. He had 17 surgeries afterwards. They thought he was going to lose the leg. He could have also lost his life. He was able to come back. I don't know if you saw his retirement video, but it was just amazing, saying he didn't even know if he could walk with his wife anymore. That's what the most important thing was, until somebody put a football in his hand. Then he realized he could come back for football. He came back this year, played on that broken leg. Apparently he was going to sign with Jacksonville as the backup, possibly mentor to Trevor Lawrence this year. But Jacksonville's doctors were very concerned about his leg, whether he'd be able to play or not. So that just shows you how good Washington's doctors still are. But he did come back. He was the player of the year. He should have been the player of the year. And his legacy is that he's one of the toughest, hardworking, most liked players, I think, in NFL history. Nobody has a bad word to say about him. He's kind of like the everyday or the everyman. He's like the Mr. Rogers of the NFL. It's kind of like, he's the good guy, the pleasant guy, the sweater vest guy. If you want to know what a nice guy's going to do, it's like, oh, just look, it's instead of like, what would Jesus do? It's like, what would Alex Smith do? And that's kind of what they go with in the NFL. I think it's going to be wonderful if he's able to be a high school or a college offense coordinator or a head coach. I think he would be great working with young kids and getting them into the right mind frame and headspace to go into the NFL.
1000% agree with everything that you said there. Alex Smith, again, definitely not a Hall of Famer. It's not even a consideration. He just had such a stellar career over such an extended period of time. But like you said, other quarterbacks come in there and they're going to give other younger quarterbacks specifically are going to come into San Francisco, are going to come into Kansas City, and you're going to lose out on your opportunity. He got to Washington. If it wasn't for that horrific injury, he may have stayed around for a few more years or whatever. I know they're trying to go younger as well, but no one anticipated that leg injury. And the fact that he was able to come back from if you've never seen the video, don't go looking for it. But if you saw what happened to his leg and you saw his recovery process, just the fact that he was able to come back, even if it was just only for part of one season, he absolutely deserved comeback player of the year. But it just showed how much heart this man had. And the fact that he was still trying to mentor these younger players that were there in Washington, it just shows the kind of person he is. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters. Great and decent human being. And he was a hell of a player, in particular, when he was healthy. I do see him going on potentially to coach. It would be great if he got into, especially most likely if he gets into college, it'll be a smaller, D2 or something like that to start out with as far as schools and as far as becoming a coach. But he could be a great start out in particular as a QB coach. He would be a phenomenal QB coach and work his way up to OC at a slightly bigger school, but still in D2 or whatever. So that's what I see in his future. And I wish him all the best because he was so phenomenal everywhere he went and has such a tremendous, great and positive impact. And players love him all around the league, whether they play with him, for him, against him. They truly, truly loved Alex Smith and the atmosphere and energy that he brought to the game and into the locker room.
Yeah, I think he would be a perfect fit being like a quarterback coach, even at his alma mater at Utah. Or this is hypothetical, and obviously it's not going to happen because you don't know where he's going to go. But his, mechanic type, his quarterback type is kind of like the same as Mac Jones, and everybody's worried about how Mac Jones is going to acclimate. So if, say, Mac Jones went to somewhere like New England, I would love to see it. It would be perfect if, like, Bill Belichick brought him in as the quarterback coach to mentor Mac Jones to show him how to do things and get everything done, because that's basically the type of quarterback that Mac Jones is looking to be.
And that would be a great fit. I definitely see him being a coach and probably not far off from being a NFL QB coach, at least maybe within the next couple of years. So looking forward to that. And I'm really, really happy for him that he was able to come back, play a decent year, and then move on. Because it more than anything, it was just the mentality that it took for him to do that. And that's so much heart and courage. And I'm so happy for him that he gets to retire on a high note of, I was able to at least come back. Whether or not it lasted another 4 or 5 years is not the point. I did it. And I overcame all of what it took to get me back here. So that's just my one of my all-time favorite stories now for the NFL.
Yep. And before we move on to the last retirement, I want to bring up another retirement story. I know we talk about football on the show. It is, the She Knows Pro Football podcast. But Roy Williams retiring at UNC, obviously he's a Hall of Fame coach for college, and that's wonderful and everything. I really don't care about, not to be offensive, I really don't care about him retiring. What I love is we talked about Eric Bieniemy not getting his chance that he should have gotten, and other minority coaches not getting their chance. And I was ecstatic when I saw that UNC finally decided to hire the right coach and not the popular coach, and picked his head assistant, Herbert Davis, who was an alum but also highly qualified, black man, to lead these young men into what they're going into the future. And I think it's a big step for the ACC and for North Carolina and for major college basketball that they were actually able to bring in a black head coach into one of these blue blood schools.
Exactly. Man, this offseason has been amazing, you guys. That's one of the things I just have to say. Well, next up in our retirements is one that's, I guess, not so surprising. Julian Edelman was cut by the Patriots, and literally the same day that they decided to release him, he went ahead and retired. It was time. He had a good run there in New England. But yeah, it was just time to go ahead and ride off into the sunset. Here's the thing, though. Julian Edelman is a controversy in his career. Postseason, he has a tremendous postseason career. During the regular season, he's like a so wide receiver. So my question, Dominic, is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer?
He is absolutely a borderline Hall of Famer. I understand you have to weigh what he did in the postseason. Everybody said, but there's two types of people. One that says stats matter. Other ones say, games matter. But you get the same arguments like, oh, well, you can't go by his regular season stats because he had the postseason. Then in the same argument, they say, well, he only did this in the regular season. Well, you just said it doesn't matter. So, it's just weird how they try and use the same stat to fight both arguments. Yes, if you're valuing, say, his regular season performance at a value of 1, then yes, you should value his postseason stats at a value of maybe 1.5 or 1.25. So weigh them a little more, but it shouldn't be everything in the postseason. You're not going to put, Isaiah Crowell in the Hall of Fame just because if he had like a great postseason run one time or what have you. You can't just go by what they did in the postseason. A lot of people have great postseason runs. That happens in baseball all the time. They get these big giant postseason runs, then they get a big contract, and then they flop the rest of their career. That doesn't mean they belong in the Hall of Fame because they had a great postseason run. He was one of the best postseason receivers of all time, that's for sure. But his overall stats don't make him a guaranteed Hall of Famer. If he gets in on the third, fourth, fifth ballot, that's fine with me. But he's not a surefire Hall of Famer. He's not an absolute Hall of Famer. And before he gets in, I want to see somebody who has the same type of postseason stats, better regular season stats, and blocked better than a man 50 pounds heavier than him like Hines Ward get in before Julian Edelman gets in.
So I'm in the camp of I do not think Julian Edelman is a Hall of Famer. I know that's super controversial for me to say that, and I have a lot of friends in that area that are pissed at me that I feel that way, but let me explain. I believe that there was a receiver for New England that had far superior stats and who had a better career there for New England, went on and played in Denver and did well there too, and that is Wes Welker. Here's the thing. We do not discuss Wes Welker going into the Hall of Fame at all. I know it comes up occasionally that, oh, well, can we put Welker into the discussion of Hall of Fame, and immediately get shot down. Like people don't even, some people do, obviously, New England people are their own biases, and so they're always pushing for all of their players to make it in. But the vast majority of people are like, Wes Welker is not even in the discussion. That's it. That's all. It's not happening. So if we're not considering Wes Welker in the discussion of going into the Hall of Fame, there's no way in holy hell that we should be having a discussion of Julian Edelman going in, because Wes Welker had a far superior career as far as I'm concerned. Whether you're talking about the time he was with New England or even the short period where he went on to Denver. So there's nothing you could do that's going to convince me otherwise. I'm not saying that his postseason numbers aren't impressive. They're damn impressive. But I cannot buy into that he is more deserving of a receiver that has the same level of, the same mediocre career, I would say, as, Edelman and Welker had similar type of careers. I believe that Welker was slightly better. And that being said, if we're not going to put Welker into consideration, I'm not putting Edelman in there, period. End of sentence.
Absolutely. Like I said, Hines Ward needs to get in over both of them, and he's not even in yet. So let's get Hines Ward in, and then we can work on Wes Welker and then maybe Edelman.
There you go. Right there. You get me Hines Ward in there, we can talk about Welker, and then somewhere down the line, maybe Edelman. We're not talking about those two ahead of Edelman. There's nothing else we need to discuss on that. Well, you guys, we got to move on to, well, first I want to talk about our free agency moves because we got a fewer of those. I want to save my draft stuff for last. So let's talk about some of these free agency moves that will have fantasy impact, because I need you guys to hear what Dominick is going to give you as far as what fantasy impact some of these moves that happen this offseason are going to make in 2021. The first one out the gate, we definitely got to talk about Kenyon Drake going to the Raiders. Now, Kenyon Drake had a decent career, I would say, there in Miami. He went on to Arizona. He had one really fabulous year there in Arizona, kind of fell off after that. So, Dominick, him going on to the Raiders, keep in mind, they already have Josh Jacobs there. What kind of fantasy impact do you think Kenyon Drake can have there, considering that Josh Jacobs is their RB1 right now?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they think Jacobs is their RB1 right now. I think that he had a great rookie year. He kind of fell back a little bit last year. I do believe that part of this was they didn't know what was going to happen with his drunk driving case, which was dismissed, so they don't have to worry about that anymore. I just think John Gruden has no idea what he's doing when it comes to personnel. He may be a great game day coach. He needs to stop being a general manager. He's not good at it at all. We saw that with the offensive line shenanigans that were happening all season there as well. I don't like this move for Drake at all, or for Jacobs. I think it's going to, both of them were, if they were in separate offenses, they could both possibly be top 12 to 15 fantasy backs. They're going to cannibalize each other here. They're barely going to be top 24 backs, so it's going to be extremely tough. They're going to lose a lot of value for anybody. I do think that Drake does have value because he can catch the ball, so if anything, he may even have a little bit more value because when it comes to fantasy points, running backs who can catch the ball obviously get more points than running backs who only run the ball because they get the point per reception or half point per reception. I think the best person for this actually may be Derek Carr. Yes, he lost a lot of receivers in Nelson Aguilar and Tyrell Williams and everything, but he gained a receiver out of the backfield in Kenyon Drake, who is, like I said, is good at those swing passes, the screen passes out of the backfield. He'll be able to find him on his dump downs along with Darren Waller. So this could be really good for, Derek Carr's stats. It could, so that I think I would take Kenyon Drake a little bit higher than Josh Jacobs at this point, but I wouldn't take any of them where either of them were going last year, where they were going in the first round or the top of the second round in, fantasy drafts. Now you're looking more fourth, maybe late third, fourth or fifth round in fantasy drafts, and you definitely don't want either of them as your running back one.
Good advice there. Definitely good advice. Next up, we definitely got to talk about Philip Lindsay going to the Texans. You guys, as a Broncos fan, I didn't expect this move. I understand that we picked up Melvin Gordon and he had a pretty good season last year, but I did not expect him to go ahead and let Philip Lindsay move on. So my question, Dominick, what kind of fantasy implication does Philip Lindsay have there in Houston?
Well, don't worry about Denver. I have a feeling they're probably going to take a running back in probably the second round here, maybe the third round. So I think you're going to get a running back to go there with Melvin Gordon because they don't want him to take all the work. Philip Lindsay, it's going to be tough for him as well. They did release Duke Johnson in Houston. They brought in, I think, at last count, it was about 75 new players as well. They're just bringing everybody in off of other teams. I think, if I'm not mistaken, literally, I think they actually did bring in between 45 and 50 new players this year. I don't have the exact number, but it is around 45 new players or so. They're just bringing in everybody that they can to fill out a roster at this point. They don't know what's going to go on with Deshaun Watson, so they're going to have some targets there. They obviously lost Will Fuller. Lindsey can catch the ball. He's not great at it, but he's going to be a very good running back. They still have David Johnson there, and he can catch the ball. He's going to be very good. I think they're going to use a lot of two running back sets there. So I think he'll have probably around the same type of, fantasy relevance this year that he did last year in Denver, maybe even a little bit less because their offensive line is not as good as it was in Denver last year. So this kind of downgrades Phillip Lindsay to me, where last year, after Melvin Gordon got there, he was going in maybe the 6th or 7th round. I think he's probably in the 7th or 8th round at this point, and he's no more than a running back 3 right now, unless something happens to David Johnson where he gets injured again before the year starts.
Which David Johnson's kind of injury prone, so that's a possibility. Next up, we definitely got to talk about Mike Davis going to the Falcons. Remember, the Falcons were sold on getting Todd Gurley in there, but come to find out that knee of his might be a little more suspect than people anticipated. So they went ahead and grabbed themselves a Mike Davis in there. Dominic, what kind of impact do you think Mike Davis is going to have there for Atlanta? Can he really help them improve?
Based on what they had in Todd Gurley last year, I certainly think they can. Gurley had some great touchdown numbers last year, but he didn't really have the rushing numbers last year. And it just came out a few days ago that Atlanta also just released Ito Smith. They haven't re-signed Todd Gurley, which means right now, obviously, they're going to have to add somebody in the draft, which they're probably going to do again in the 2nd or 3rd round. But Mike Davis is the only man there in the backfield for Atlanta. They do have an offensive line full of first-rounders, which we heard all of last year about the first-round starting lineup. But they do have first-round starters there, which is good. I do think they're not going to take somebody in the 1st round to compete with him. The 2nd or 3rd round, they'll have somebody in there to bring in as a committee. Maybe not Javon Williams, maybe from Atlanta possibly, or from North Carolina, somebody like that. So I do think that he is going to be the number one guy there. They are going to want to run the ball. We know that they do like to pass the ball quite a bit with Matt Ryan, and why wouldn't you if you have Calvin Ridley there as well as Julio Jones? If they get Kyle Pitts in the draft this year, that's just going to add another weapon there. That's really going to open things up for him. And if he plays as good as he did last year, the line in Atlanta should be better than the line was last year in Carolina when he did good things there. Obviously, he's in the same division, so he's going to be going against the same defenses for the most part. But going against Carolina's defense actually might even be an upgrade over going against Atlanta's defense because they're both pretty trashy. He could be one of those surprising top 12 picks that you get later in the draft. I think he's probably going to go in the maybe 3rd or 4th round, and he could end up as a top 10 running back.
Definitely got to agree with you there. He definitely could have a good impact for them. Next up, let's talk about Curtis Samuel headed to Washington FT. Now, Curtis Samuel didn't have a massive impact there in Carolina for many reasons, one of which is they got a hell of a running game. But now that he's headed to Washington, what kind of fantasy impact do you think Curtis Samuel will have for FT next season?
I love it. Their offensive line is getting better. We know they have an elite defense right now. We know that Ryan Fitzgerald has never seen a pass that he didn't want to throw. Obviously, we said last year he was behind DJ Moore in that offense, and then Robbie Anderson came in. A lot of people didn't know what to expect from Robbie Anderson. He really picked it up last year. It was great to see. Curtis Samuel had a little bit of a breakout, but not much. But coming out of Ohio State, he was a running back, so we know he can also run the ball a little bit there, so he can get some work out of the backfield, out of the slot. So I really like him as the wide receiver too in this offense across from Terry McLaurin. This is going to be really good for Terry McLaurin. He could possibly get up into that top 15 where people thought he was going to be last year before all the injuries and everything happened with the quarterback position. With Ryan Fitzpatrick there, they're going to throw the ball a lot more. A lot of those passes are going to go to McLaurin and to Curtis Samuel. And usually every year there's two teammates, like two teams that have teammates that are in the top 20 as a wide receiver. And this year I do honestly feel that one of those teams could be Washington with McLaurin and with Samuel.
Nice. So really see a tremendous improvement for Washington FT then this coming season.
That, and I think that Dallas, we know their defense is trash. The Eagles are kind of rebuilding, and the Giants are the Giants. So I think that the NFC Beast is now obviously, instead of the AFC least, now it's kind of switching to the NFC least. So I think that they are Dallas has the offense, but I think overall team Washington is the team to beat in the division.
Nice. Wow. Really nice. And last up on my free agency moves, my favorite move that happened this offseason has got to be Kenny Golladay going to the Giants. My goodness. You had to know that he wasn't going to stay with the Lions. It was coming. But to the Giants, that's hell of an impressive move on their part. So, Dominic, what kind of impact do you think Kenny Golladay is going to have for them Giants next season?
Yeah, as soon as he started missing games last year, I absolutely knew 100% he wasn't going to come back and they weren't going to franchise him. He was saving himself for free agency. He obviously basically just went for a money grab. He went to whoever's going to pay him the highest money. I don't think he went to a great situation. We don't know what to really expect from Danny Dimes. We do hope that Saquon Barkley is going to be back and healthy. If so, he's going to be one of the best running backs in the entire league. We know that. He's going to be alongside Sterling Shepard in there. We don't know what Evan Ingram's going to do. He hasn't really done anything much in his career so far. So it's going to be tough for him to do a whole lot unless they can fix that offensive line. And we don't even know what they're going to do at number 11 in this draft. He may end up he'll be the number one there, but they may end up picking a Waddle or a Smith in this draft. And if that happens, then he's going to even lose more of the pie. So I think this is good for his wallet, but I don't think it's very, very good for his fantasy value. I had him up at number 7 last year before he missed all those games. I'll probably have him drop him down a little bit. I'm not going to drop him down to 30 or anything because he still is a very talented wide receiver and he can get touchdowns at any given time. He's a big guy, but I'm probably not going to have him in my top 10 this year. He'll probably be somewhere in the 14 to 18 range. I just think that with the downgrade, obviously, from Stafford to Danny Dimes, and I don't know. I don't like this move for his fantasy value or for him, really.
Yeah, I think it's going to have an impact, but I just don't have a lot of confidence in Danny Dimes. Everybody knows how I feel about. I called him Danny Petties all last season, so we'll see. I do appreciate that they did get Kenny Golladay. I do think he'll have somewhat of an impact, but no faith whatsoever in Danny Dimes. So we'll see how that's going to work out.
Yeah, between paying him $72 million and paying Adoree Jackson $39 million, they kind of overpaid for players to get talent in there to try and save the job of Edelman.
1,000%, but that's not surprising considering who we're talking about. Now, that was our big free agency moves. Some big trade moves that happened. There was 2 of them, and they're both QBs. My first one that I want to talk about, obviously, has got to be the bigger of the 2, which is Carson Wentz, who went to the Colts. Now, Colts kind of had no choice. They had to make a QB move considering that Phillip Rivers retired this past offseason. So my question to you, Dominic, is what kind of impact is Carson Wentz going to come in there and have with this Colts next season?
I think he definitely got humbled the first day he got there. We know they didn't sign Brisket back. He went down to the Dolphins to be the backup there to Tua to replace Ryan Fitzpatrick. They did re-sign T.Y. Hilton, so that's going to be a good guy on the outside for him to be able to throw to. For one thing, that he's been very inaccurate in his career at times, but he always has a very good deep ball, and he's very accurate with that. That's why he was so good when he had Deshaun Jackson in Philadelphia. So I think that him and T.Y. can really get some things going there. They lost DeCostanza, their left tackle, but they still have one of the best offensive lines in the league. They're going to try and do something in the draft there to fix that offensive line a little bit. They brought Marlon Mack back as well. They also have Jonathan Taylor there. So this is going to be I think this is going to be really good for him. I think he'll go back up to not what he was in 2017, but he's not going to be nearly as bad as he was last year. And like I said, he was humbled when he got there. Obviously, it went around the locker rooms that he was maybe a little bit arrogant or a little bit full of himself when he was in Philadelphia. The first thing he did when he got to Indianapolis was called Michael Pittman and say, hey, how attached are you to your number? He said, yeah, you're not getting. And he said, oh, okay, I was just curious. I'm thinking about changing my number anyway. So, he said he was humbled right off the bat by the guy saying, no, you're not going to get this number. It's not like a Tom Brady, Chris Godwin thing where he's like, oh, yeah, go, you're the legend and everything. So I do think this is going to be good for him. He's back with Frank Reich, who he had his most success under in 2017 during that Super Bowl year. So this is going to be really good for him. If he's not able to succeed here, then he's going to be pretty much done after they'll probably keep him for 2 years because they have the contract says that they're going to. But after that, he could be on the Mitchell Trubisky, path going forward if he doesn't pan out this year.
I just feel like the fact that he's going to be back with Frank Reich is going to make a difference for him. I feel like when Frank Reich left, it left a void for him that he was never able to recover from. And then he started suffering those injuries, which just made everything even worse. So definitely feel like him being back there with Reich will make a huge difference for him. So we'll see how that pans out. I'm definitely wishing him well. And the other big trade, again, another QB, is Sam Darnold was traded to the Panthers. My goodness. I don't know if I'm just surprised that the Jets pulled the trigger on this or if I'm more shocked that the Panthers were willing to take that on, considering that Darnold so far hasn't had he hasn't had a decent career yet so far. I don't put that all on Darnold. He has had an atrocious offensive line. He had a horrible head coach there. So Dominic, he's getting a fresh start there in Carolina. What kind of impact do you think that he can have and what he can bring there to that team next season?
Yeah, he certainly had horrible coaching there in New York. I mean, even Josh McCown was going to the coaches on a weekly basis saying, listen, you have to simplify this. You have the same play under 4 different names. You can't have that, so you have to simplify this. And they wouldn't do it. So it was, I blame the coaching a lot of what his ilks were. Although he did have a good freshman year at USC, but he always had, fumbling issues, turnover issues. Those were never corrected. They thought they could correct it when they got to the NFL, and it hasn't been done. So he is going to have to correct those. I do think this is a low risk for them. They said they were going to exercise his 5th-year option, but they still have not done it yet. I think the only reason they even went out and got him is because of everything that's going on with Deshaun Watson. Watson was obviously their first choice. They may have had other choices that they were thinking about as well. We know they tried to go after Stafford. They offered the 8th pick for Stafford, and the Lions said no because they already had a relationship with LA. And plus, they got 2 first-round picks instead of just 1. So he wasn't their first choice. He was their 3rd, maybe even 4th choice. This is not good for Teddy Bridgewater. I do feel that Teddy Bridgewater is probably going to end up somewhere else, possibly with your Broncos. If they don't pick somebody in the NFL draft, he could go there, although I don't really know if that's an upgrade over Drew Lock, so it's kind of like a lateral move. But I love Darnold in this. I think that I really like Matt Rule. I think he knows what to do with offenses. He knows how to get the best out of the players. He already has Robbie Anderson there. He has DJ Moore there. If they take a wide receiver or if they build up that offensive line with the 8th pick, maybe taking Rashawn Slater, it could be very, very good things for him. And I do think that he is going to have a kind of a resurgence after, a mid-year resurgence, or mid-career, kind of like we were talking about with Alex Smith, where this first 2 or 3 years were almost on the bust level. And then after that, he kind of finally picked it up. And I think that could easily happen here with his new team in Carolina.
Definitely got to agree with you there. I think he just was in a bad situation with some horrible head coaches. And I think a fresh start with a coach that's newer to the NFL will definitely give him an opportunity to really show himself and show that he's not already in the league and washed up already. And if he gets an opportunity to do that there at Carolina, I'm absolutely happy for him. Well, you guys, y'all know what next week is. I know what next week is. It's time for the NFL draft. So Dominic and I decided we're going to do a little mock draft because Dominic is really good at this and I'm not. So that being said, we're only going to go over our top 10 picks. So I'm going to need Dominic to give me his best effort. We're going to start right at the top, you guys. The number 1 overall pick, which is the Jaguars. Dominic, who are they going to pick?
Yeah, it's obviously Trevor Lawrence. He's the prototype. Since he came out of high school 3 years ago, he's the number 1 or number 2 with Justin Fields. They're going back and forth, both out of Georgia. He's was basically was given the throne as the number one pick in 2021. They knew as soon as he was eligible, he was going to go number one, basically. From what I hear, he's like, he's 6'6", 230 pounds with the hair of Fabio and a chiseled physique. So, he kind of looks like me a little bit. So he's the prototype of what you want in this NFL. And he's going to be perfect toy for Urban Meyers to get his Jacksonville career started with.
Urban Meyer's there with Trevor Lawrence is going to be something scary. I don't expect it to work out immediately, but I say within a couple of years, it definitely could be something worth watching. So I'm glad that Trevor Lawrence is definitely going to land with the Jags, only because of Urban Meyer being there and the impact that I feel like he'll have on this kid. Next up at the number 2 pick, we got the Jets. Dominic, who are the Jets going to pick up?
Yeah, I have them taking Zach Wilson. Obviously, everybody has that pick, so I'm not breaking any ground here. I don't personally like this pick. I think there's other quarterbacks that are better than him. I think Justin Fields is better than him. I think Trey Lance is better than him. I even have McCorkle Jones better than him as well. He's actually my 5th quarterback in this draft, so I'm not big on this pick, but they seem to really like him unless they're just making a huge giant smokescreen. And if that's the case, good on them. But I do think this is going to be the pick. I really do hope it works out for him. But I think they always say that of the 5 quarterbacks that are probably going to be taken in the first round, at least 2 of them are probably going to not have the career that you expect them to. I don't want to say bust, but just not have the career you expect them to. And unfortunately, I think that he could be the Josh Rosen of this group.
I'm sorry for laughing, but yeah, definitely. The number 3 overall pick is the 49ers, who moved up to this spot. Dominic, who did they move up to get?
Yeah, I think they moved up to get Trey Lance, if I remember my mock draft correctly. I really like Trey Lance. He's my 2nd quarterback this year. I know he only had 17 games. He didn't really play anything this year other than the one showcase game against Central Arkansas. But I just really like what he can do. He has the strongest arm in this draft. He can run the ball as well. He had over 1,000 yards rushing in his 1 year. He's a big guy as well. He's 6'5", 235 pounds. Same school as Carson Wentz, as Easton Stick, who's now with the Chargers. Before that, it was Jansen. They've had a string of decent quarterbacks there, and I think he's going to be the next one. And with the offense that Kyle Shanahan has there in San Francisco. Obviously, he didn't have that type of quarterback in Matt Ryan or Jimmy Garoppolo, but we saw what he could do with Ryan Griffin III in his first year in Washington before the injuries really affected him, and I think he can do the same thing here with Trey Lance in San Francisco. Plus, they already said they want to keep Jimmy G for another year, and if they're being honest with that, and that's the case, then I really like it because I do think that Trey Lance is going to be better if they have the Patrick Mahomes treatment and just let him sit this year and bring him in maybe for like week 18 this year or start him fresh in 2022, then I think he could have a really great career.
And I think that's going to be a really good for them. Good, really, really great fit for the 49ers. At the number 4 pick is the Falcons. Dominic, why do you think Justin Fields is going to the Falcons, considering they still got Matt Ryan there?
Well, I don't. That's why I put a little star next to it. I put them there, and I also have a star next to another team who you happen to root for. I think that the Broncos are going to trade up to 4, and they're going to take Justin Fields. And I think that you're going to have a new quarterback to either compete with Drew Lock or beat out Drew Lock in training camp this year for the Broncos, to work with Cortland Sutton coming back and to work with the rest of the Melvin Gordon and hopefully maybe a running back or something that they get in the 2nd round. They built up that defense this offseason. They had some, they re-signed their, the best safety in the league. They brought in some cornerbacks. Now they need to work on that offense. They already have their offensive lines pretty good. So I think what they're really missing now is the quarterback. They're going to get it, Justin Fields. But if they do stay at 9, I do think that they're going to take the same player that I have Atlanta taking at 9, because you can never have too many cornerbacks in a division, with Justin Herbert and with Patrick Mahomes.
Wow, that'll definitely be interesting. We'll see what the Broncos actually do. Number 5 is the Bengals. You are too funny. Tell me why, Dominic, you think Jamar Chase go there to the Bengals, and what impact you think he'll have?
Well, I think that it's quite simple. I mean, we saw that the only year he played in college was 2 years ago when he had Joe Burrow as his quarterback. He had 20 touchdowns that year, 1,800 yards. I just think he's a great player. He has that connection from LSU with Joe Burrow. I personally would not take him here. They need to really work on that offensive line. I would take, Penei Sewell here or Rashawn Slater, whichever they have on their board is higher. Well, whichever one they have on their board is higher, I would take the other one. But I would definitely take offensive line here. That's what they really need. But I do think that they're going to want to build up the offense around, Joe Burrow, although he can't really throw to receivers when he's on his back. But they're going to try and do everything they can to give him as many, weapons as possible. So if it's not Jamar Chase, like I said, I think it should be Penei Sewell. But if it's not, then I think it'll be Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts. And I just think that with the connection that Burrow already has with Chase, that he'll get the nod over Pitts.
That definitely makes sense. I definitely feel like the Bengals I 1,000% agree they need to address the offensive line issue, but I also do think that they need receivers there for sure. Next up is the Dolphins. Now, that's an interesting one. Dominic, tell me why you think that they're going to land Kyle Pitts.
This one's easy. BPA, best player available. They're not going to replace Tua. They already said they want to keep him there, and I do think that they're not going to, pull in Arizona and take, Kyler Murray 1 year after taking Josh Rosen. I don't think they're not going to take, Mac Jones or something like that. So I don't think they're going to have to worry about that. Their offensive line, they did quite a bit on that last year with some draft picks, with Austin Jackson, with Hunt in the second round. So I think they're pretty good there as well. They're very young in the defense. They took some cornerbacks and linebackers and, defensive ends last year in the draft. So I think the first thing they need to do is get some skilled players to help Tua. He could be the best skill player in this draft, other than maybe Trevor Lawrence. I know a lot of people still like Trevor Lawrence, but he could be number 2. 6'6", 250 pounds, runs a 4.4. Yeah, he's not just a tight end. He could be a wide receiver if you want him to. So I think that with Mike Gesicki on the field, you can have him on the other side of the field, and he's just going to open things up for everybody. Devontae Adams for everybody that's there. So I like Kyle Pitts. Before the year, I think a lot of people had him probably going in like the second or third round. Now they have him as like the, Daniel Jeremiah has him as the second best player on his entire board, and I tend to agree with him. So I just think that he's a special talent, and he would do great staying in the state of Miami, just going, down to the bottom part of Miami instead of the top part in Gainesville.
Definitely a good point there. Next up, we got the Detroit Lions. Well, considering they let Galladay walk, you think that they're going to pick up Jalen Waddle. So saying that, why do you think it's going to be Waddle, and what kind of impact can he immediately come into Detroit and have?
Well, with what they have on the roster, he's going to immediately be the wide receiver number 1 there. They're going to have to pick up a lot of receivers in this draft. They're probably going to have to get 2 or 3 in this draft, plus sign a couple of undrafted free agents. So they'll probably end up with like 5 new wide receivers coming into into training camp. I think he'll be the first one. I'm going to take him over Devontae Smith. I know Devontae Smith was the Heisman Trophy winner last year. He had a great year. I just think that you don't want Devontae Smith right now as your number 1. He's just a little bit too small. He's 170 pounds, maybe. We don't even know, because he won't weigh himself. He wouldn't go through any of the, measurements at his camp or anything. So we don't know exactly what he is. With that said, we know what kind of speed Waddle has. We know how tough he is. He broke his ankle last year and then came back in the championship game and was still able to play and was still the fastest guy on the field. So I just really like him. I don't think that Jared Goff is completely done. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but they're going to need somebody that can, get open, get downfield, and I think he can certainly do that. So I just feel he's going to be the best pick for them. If they don't take Waddle there, I think they'll take somebody on defense, maybe like a Micah Parsons out of Penn State at linebacker. But I really think they need to work on that offense first if they want to do anything.
Yeah, Lions got a lot they need to address, but they definitely got to get another receiver, because after that Galladay loss, they're definitely going to have to do something about that. But they need to address that O-line as well. So
yeah, and they also lost Marvin Jones.
There you go. So like you said, Waddle's it seems like it's the obvious choice. They definitely have to get a receiver there. It's not a question whatsoever. Next up is the Panthers. Now, you went safe but totally one I agree with. And you said that that's where Penei Sewell is going to end up. Now, do you think that Penei Sewell will definitely come in and have an immediate impact there with Carolina, considering that they just picked up a new QB?
I do, and if he was gone, which if he does go at number 5 like he should, then I would have had Rasad Slater here. But I do like Penei Sewell. I mean, he's young. He was playing since he was a freshman in college, 19 years old. He just dominates everybody. Sometimes he's a little over aggressive, but it's better to be over aggressive than passive. So I do really like him there. He can play left tackle. He can play right tackle. Luckily Carolina doesn't have either one, so they may need him to play both. I just think that if he comes in there, he's gonna be able to block the blind side for Sam Darnold, and he will immediately improve that line to better than he ever had in New York. And I just really love the fit with him in Carolina, and I think that Matt Rule is going to love him, and so is Sam Darnold.
I can't wait for that, and I think Penei Sewell being there definitely help tremendously next season. I think that'll be an improvement on that line, and that's definitely going to help our boy now that he's made it over there. So good luck to Sam Darnold, and especially if he gets Penei Sewell. Next up is my Broncos, and this is the one that you said might flip, but if they do stick at their spot, you think that they're going to take Patrick Surtain. Why do you think that Patrick Surtain would be a good fit for the Broncos?
Well, like I said, whether it be the Broncos or in this case, I think it is going to be Atlanta. Both of them are in divisions with good offenses. With Tampa Bay, New Orleans have good offenses. Carolina should have a decent offense. And obviously, if it's the AFC West, they have the Chargers there with Herbert, like we talked about. They have the Chiefs there. The Raiders can be better. So either way, you need secondary help. And we know, like I said, the Broncos did pick up some secondary help, but they can always use another, young cornerback. He has his father, Patrick Surtain, was already in the NFL, so he has the pedigree. I just think he's a great fit for the scheme. So whether he goes to Atlanta, which obviously lost, they need a lot on defense. One of the things they really need is the secondary, so that's why I really think he would be perfect in Atlanta. But whether it be Atlanta or whether it be the Broncos, I do think that they need secondary help especially in their divisions, and they're going to get it with this pick in Patrick Surtain.
Definitely think that's a good pick, and I would love to see it happen. And last of my top 10 picks, we got to talk about them Cowboys and why you think J.C. Horn is going to the Cowboys and what kind of impact you think he'll have in 2021.
Well, another one, they just lost their cornerback. We saw how elite their defense was last year, which was elite for other teams' offenses. They can't take any more receivers. They already have too many. They have Dak Prescott. They have Ezekiel Elliott. They have Tony Pollard. Their offensive line is a little shaky now, but there's not really anybody here other than maybe Rashawn Slater that you would want to take at this point. But I don't think they're going to go in that direction. They really need to build up as much as they can on that defense in this draft. It starts with the best. Some people say he's the best cornerback. Others say he's second. But he's going to, if Surtain goes at number 9, he is the best one that's left. And coming out of South Carolina, he also has the pedigree. He's the son of Joe Horn. So I do think that he's, going to be a very, very good fit there. And he's going to be a day one starter with Dallas just out of necessity.
1000% agree. They definitely need help in that secondary. Good Lord, did they get exposed last season. And I got one final question for you, Dominic. Is there any, we're only going to cover the top 10. There's obviously 32 picks. Is there any other pick that could have an immediate impact to whatever team they go to next season? Who else is left on that draft board that you think if they went to a particular team or that they can immediately in 2021 just have a breakout season?
Yeah, I'll give you two. And one of them's not really a breakout season, but the fact that I think Minnesota, and actually I have them taking this in my draft, is I have them taking, Newsome from Northwestern. Greg Newsome, he's the cornerback from Northwestern. He wasn't a big name coming into the year, but he had an outstanding year. We saw that they took a lot of cornerbacks last year in the draft, but their rookie last year, Jeff Gladney, that they took in the first round out of TCU, is turning himself in for felony count, so we don't know what's going to happen with him in the core system. So if that's the case, they're really going to need another cornerback to fill in there. So I do really think they're going to take Greg Newsome at number 14 here. And another one that I like for fantasy purposes and for team fit is Pittsburgh taking a running back in the first round. If they can get Najee Harris in the first round, that would be perfect. He's a big guy, 6 foot. He's over 6 foot. He's 235 pounds. He's kind of like in the Derrick Henry mold, except he can actually catch the ball. He's also very funny. I don't know if you heard him on the Adam Schefter podcast, but he was great. He has a big personality. It was just great to hear him. He's an awesome dude. So I really think he would fit there. He's not going to be the Le'Veon Bell type that obviously we heard when Le'Veon Bell left there how much the offensive lineman hated blocking for him because he would juke and jive and everything else and try and get around. He's going to be more that James Conner type, which bulls in there, makes one cut and goes. That's going to be great for their offensive line. And he could be a monster if he ends up in Pittsburgh behind that offensive line and in that run game where they know that if you're the running back in Pittsburgh, you're basically guaranteed 95% of the rushes.
That's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait for this draft, you guys. It is next Thursday is the beginning of our draft. We will see how dead on Dominick is, and then we will talk about how well he did after next week. So you guys, I'm definitely looking forward to this. Be sure to tune in. It's next Thursday. Well, you guys, that's all the time that we have today. I want to thank you all again for listening, for sticking it out and waiting for us to come back to talk about this draft and this free agency moves and the offseason and everything. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at TheNFLGirl320. Dominick, where can they follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at EnvisionFF and the same on Clubhouse.
You can read more of my thoughts on SheKnowsProFootball.com. Dominick, where can they read your work?
You can read my work at FantasyHotRead.com, ExpandTheBoxScore.com, and Rotoballer.com.
That's all the time we have, you guys. See you back here next time.